Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Daily Balance podcast. I'm your host, Adean.
And I'm Brittany.
Our mission is to turn awareness into action, and today we're focusing that mission on cervical health. Medical guidelines are constantly evolving, and it's essential to know what questions to ask your doctor beyond the routine checkup. We're diving into the latest screening innovations and the symptoms that should not be ignored. Today's episode is titled Beyond the Pap Smear, What Every Woman Needs to Know.
When we hear cervical health, we often think of a quick once a year or once every 3 years appointment. We just want to get it over with.
Yes.
But for those navigating a diagnosis, or for the millions of women who aren't sure if they are up to date on the latest guidelines, the reality is much broader.
Our guest today is Tamika Felder, founder and chief visionary officer of Cervivor Inc., a cancer survivor, award winning women's health advocate, and chief visionary at Cervivor. That's Cervivor Inc. I like to play. A nonprofit dedicated to cervical cancer advocacy and support. Tamika also has a mission to eradicate cancer and shine a spotlight on the patient voice in healthcare. Named a cancer rebel by Newsweek, Tamika is a highly sought after speaker on cervical cancer advocacy, cancer prevention, HPV education, and living life with purpose. She shared her story on presidential panels convened by the White House.
Okay.
She shared her story, and she's also trained thousands of ambassadors using her signature patient advocacy framework and traveled internationally to share her experiences with women around the world.
Tamika currently serves as a co-chair on the National HPV Vaccination Roundtable and an advisor for Mission Driven Tech. Tamika was appointed by President Joseph Biden to be a member of the National Cancer Advisory Board. She is regularly tapped by leading organizations and Fortune 500 companies around the globe to share her expertise. An award-winning television producer and host, Tamika is a captivating personality as well as an engaging and talented storyteller. Her work has led her to being featured on Bravo's Real Housewives of Beverly Hills franchise, as well as a profile feature in an award-winning documentary, Someone You Love, the HPV epidemic and conquering cervical cancer in the USA.
In this episode, we're asking the hard questions. Why are the screening guidelines changing? And is a pap smear actually enough anymore? What is the real link between HPV and cervical cancer, and how do we strip away the stigma? And most importantly, how can we advocate for ourselves in the exam room to ensure we're receiving the full scope of preventative care?
So join us as we move beyond the clinical routine to explore the full spectrum of cervical wellness, offering insights and new perspectives on staying proactive and balanced in your health journey.
You know, I had a conversation earlier this week with my aunt in Virginia. There are 5 main types of gynecological cancers that affect a woman's reproductive system. And this I didn't know. Cervical, ovarian, uterine or endometrial, vaginal, and vulvar. These cancers are often categorized by where they originate in the pelvis. A rare 6th type called fallopian tube cancer is also recognized.
Wow.
So here are the statistics in cervical health in 2026. Let's talk stats regarding cervical cancer. The prevalence is approximately 14,000 women are diagnosed with invasive cervical cancer each year just in the United States.
Well, let's talk about risk factors. Almost all cases of cervical cancer are caused by persistent infections with high-risk types of HPV,
which is the human papilloma virus. The mortality is, despite being one of the most preventable forms of cancer, More than 4,000 women still lose their lives to this disease annually in the United States. It doesn't have to be that way.
And we're going to find out from an expert that it really doesn't have to be that way.
No.
Disparities, much like we see in our other health areas, Black and Hispanic women have higher rates of cervical cancer incidences and mortality compared to white women, often due to barriers in access to screening and follow up care. Come on now.
So, our expert guest, Tamika, joining us today, Tamika Felder, Chief Visionary of Survivor Inc. Cervivor, again, Cervivor, is a nonprofit organization of patient advocates, survivors, and thrivers dedicated to ending cervical cancer through education, support, and advocacy. Founded in 2005 by survivor Tamika Felder, the organization focuses on removing the stigma around the disease and HPV and turning survivors into powerful voices for change.
They actively advocate for the WHO 90-70-90 strategy. The WHO 90-70-90 strategy is the global roadmap launched by the World Health Organization to eliminate cervical cancer as a public health problem.
Which we are no longer members of now. The United States is no longer, as of this week in January of 2026, we're no longer members of that. So we won't
Just
have
go
that.
to the website, people. 90% of girls vaccinated against HPV, 70% of women screened regularly, and 90% of those diagnosed receiving timely treatment. That's the 90-70-90.
Welcome to our guest, Tamika Felder. It's a pleasure to have you with us today to help us find clarity in a topic that is so vital for our listeners, Tamika. Let's dive right in because we have some life-saving information to share today.
Definitely. So, beyond the screening and the scope, the new standard, can you explain the shift from a traditional pap smear to primary HPV testing? Why is it the medical community moving in this direction?
Well, first of all, advanced technology is always good. The PAP has been around since it was invented, I believe, 1952 by Nikolai I can't even Papa Nicolau. And so that was really great. So before that, there really was no screening for cervical cancer. Cervical cancer used to be the number one killer of women. The HPV test was FDA approved in 2003, and it was a great advancement. Since then, we've had better PAP tests, better HPV tests, HPV DNA. We've had co-testing, PAP plus HPV. And so there really is a little something for everyone. We also now have self-collection tests. And that's a question that people ask about a lot. And I'm really excited about it all. I remember being diagnosed at 25 and not really knowing anything about cervical cancer until I was impacted by it. And so it's really great now to be able to have something that whether you're in a rural urban setting, you can self-collect, or maybe if your doctor's 3 hours away, if you live in an urban setting and you just literally cannot get to your doctor for whatever reason, also there's shared decision making because technology is so better, the guidelines change. I know some people get upset and they say, oh, if I waited 3 years, I would be dead. I would be this. And I get that. But you have to think about maybe when you were diagnosed, the testing was different. And so always having advanced testing is great. And there are lots of advocates, patient advocates, and just all types of advocates who want to make sure that the standard of care is great and is best when helping people not get cervical cancer or detect it as early as possible. So one, there's no loss of life, and if no loss of life, no loss of fertility, or no harsh secondary conditions because of cervical cancer.
Okay, so some of the symptoms to watch for. What are the subtle symptoms like irregular bleeding or pelvic discomfort that, women often dismiss as normal or hormonal shifts?
Well, that's one thing I was going to say. It's one of those things where it really whispers, and sometimes it is hard to tell because it could be something bleeding during and after sex. It could be frequent urination. It could be a heavy menstrual cycle. It could be any of those things could mean a number of different things. This is why also those preventative screenings are really, really important, making sure that you have a doctor that you trust, that you like, that you feel you're heard, you're seen. But that also means that on the other side of things, we have to be good patients as well. We can't expect for our doctors to be this miracle workers and we're wreaking havoc. But we know that Black women often are not heard, they're not seen, they're not listened to. But it is a two-way street. And
Yeah.
so we want to make sure, first and foremost, that you have a clinician that you're very happy with, right? You also want to make sure if your clinical office isn't doing the follow up, you're doing the follow up. And you're making sure that if you do get a diagnosis, because we know that Black women are 2 times as more likely than our white counterparts to die of cervical cancer, we also have a huge incidence of not following up. I fall in both of those categories. I know better now, obviously. And so we want to make sure if you do get a diagnosis, if you do start a protocol, that you are following up. We love Jesus, we love the Lord, but we're not just going to pray it away and that's it. We're also going to use science to make sure that we deal with this.
Right. So let's dive into a little bit about important steps.
Mm-hmm.
So for a woman who hasn't had an exam in several years, what is the first step she could take, and why is early detection the ultimate game changer?
It's the ultimate game changer because most people don't realize that you can die of cervical cancer. Comparatively to breast cancer, lung cancer, skin cancer, the numbers are lower, but the difference is we know the cause of almost all cervical cancers, the human papillomavirus. We have screening tools, unlike other cancers, to detect the cause of said cancer, which is the HPV. And we also have a vaccine to prevent that cause. So that's the difference there. And so we really want people to be proactive with their health and scheduling it. And I know firsthand, nobody wants to go in and get a pap smear. It is not fun. It is not something like easy, but neither is a breast exam, right? Neither is a colposcopy, none of the colonoscopy, none of these things are easy. Comfortable, they can be traumatic, but there are things that we have to do because the other side of it is much worse, and that's cancer.
Absolutely. So, we often hear that screenings can stop after a certain age. So, for our listeners that may be in their 60s and beyond, what should their conversation with their doctor look like? And why is that dangerous to assume that you've aged out of the cervical cancer risk?
So I'm not a doctor, so let me put that disclaimer out there first and foremost. But yes, it is true that through the guidelines, and guidelines is just that, to guide you, that they're not the end all be all, but if you change relationships, if you see something different in your underwear, if you see something different when you wipe, if you see something in the toilet after you use the bathroom, if you see something during or in between sex. So I would say maybe you've aged out of getting screening, but there are different levels to it, because are you stopped getting screening because you've had a hysterectomy? And was that hysterectomy a partial hysterectomy, a full hysterectomy, a radical hysterectomy? Did you have a hysterectomy because of cancer? So there's so many different scenarios, and it's best to make that decision with your provider, right? And also because there are many factors that go into, people are maybe widowed and they're starting new relationships. Maybe they're intimate with a new partner. So maybe that could contribute to some cell changes. And when you go in and see your doctor, it isn't just for cervical screening. They're, doing visual tests, pelvic exams. They're checking your anal, your anus, because you can have cancer there. So yes, the guidelines say that you can stop at a certain age, but they also say if this, and this. So it's really important. It's a lot of information. There isn't a kind of one shoe fits all for cervical cancer. What we do know is that, we have great screening tests, we have a great vaccine, and no one should die from this disease.
Well, we're going to get into the vaccine a little bit later on in our segments, but in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the advocacy and the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where we're going to talk about the balance, stigma factor. HPV is incredibly common, yet it carries a heavy social weight. How can we frame the conversation around cervical health to reduce that shame?
Well, I mean, I'm glad we're doing this talk, because talks like this conversations really help with that stigma. There really shouldn't be any stigma because it's so common. One of the things that was so frustrating to me was that I kept hearing all the time through my experience with cervical cancer, every time I would see a doctor, every time I would see a nurse, they would say, "Don't worry, we see this all the time." And at some point I was like, well, if we see this all the time, why am I here? Why is this happening to me? And why do why didn't I know about it in advance? Why don't my friends know about it? My family, my colleagues, or whoever else. So it really was like, well, wait a minute, which one is it? And so really, I asked my doctor, I said, why wouldn't you say it? And she said, well, because people would think somebody cheated, or they would think this and they would think that. And I think we do a disservice to people thinking we would just jump there. But I also think the medical community, and I call them out with love, has also done a disservice, because right now we're moving backwards. I often say that this issue has a marketing problem, right? You
Yes.
know, that the message out there is like, it wouldn't happen to me, it wouldn't happen to my little Johnny or my little Susie, but this can happen to anyone. There also is this, it happens to poor people of color. Yeah, it does. But it also happens to wealthy white women too. And so we need to really be mindful of those stereotypes and those messages that we put out there. Because which one is it? Can it happen to anyone, or does it just happen to poor people? Um, and when we say it happens to poor people, it's not necessarily that it's happening to poor people. It's happening to people who have systematically, because of racism and other things for decades, who've fallen through the gaps. And those gaps have often gotten wider despite a lot of the things that we're doing. So we really have to be careful about, excuse me, the messages that we send around this. And if we really want to make a difference, we have to, balance the playing field. And that means making sure that everyone has access, everyone is aware, and that there is no stigma. Because if we keep perpetuating the stigma, people are going to continue to die of a preventable cancer.
A preventable, exactly. Keyword preventable.
Mhm,
So let's get into a little bit of self care and screening. A
mhm,
large focus in our podcast is the daily balance. For
mhm,
those who experience anxiety
mhm.
or fear of the exam, what practical strategies do you recommend to maintain mental health during the process?
It's a brand new year. This is the best time to set yourself up for success, to go ahead and get it out of the way if you haven't done it. If you did do it late last year and and everything was fine and you don't need any follow up, make a reminder in your phone from 3 years from now, or whatever your provider told you. But really, going in and finding that balance, it's about overall health, right? It's overall peace. And there are times when we know we should be screened and we don't want to do it because we have skin anxiety, or you
Yes.
know, if I go to the doctor, they're gonna find something and I just don't even want to hear it. Hello,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm I'm guilty of it. But I also know what it feels like to almost die from something that you could have easily taken care of. We also have to make sure that when we go to the doctor, that we are not shaming our patients. I'm not blaming this as the reason that I had cancer detected so late, but when I first moved from South Carolina to DC, I didn't have health insurance, and it wasn't a big deal. I was, a freelance broadcast journalist, and that was common, right? When I did go and see a doctor, she fat shamed me. She said, your belly's so big you wouldn't know if you were pregnant, blah 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 blah. And I stopped her. I was like, I don't. I'll reschedule the PAP. And she was like, no 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 no. And I didn't go back for some time. And I shared this story again, not to blame her, but to share the things which sometimes you just need to keep your mouth shut and do what you need to do, because it's already such an effort to go in there. It's already such an invasive procedure. It's
Exactly.
already something that's so uncomfortable, something that feels unnatural. And then you're going to add those isms on top of it. And so the providers, they need to be careful as well, because they say they want to help, and a lot of them do, but there are some that do the opposite. And that doctor that I had was one of the ones that did the opposite.
Yeah, I got it. So now that we're talking a little bit about this, let's talk about navigating the system. So, what would you say are your top resources for helping women find low cost and accessible screening? Those options, that are if you're currently underinsured or uninsured.
And I love that you're talking about being underinsured. I think a lot of people jump to people just not being insured, but there are
Uh-huh.
people who are insured, but they're underinsured. That was something that I was not familiar with. I've been thrown into this world, so now I have familiarity with a lot of things that I didn't have before. So it's really important. There are a lot of programs out there. The hard thing about it is there's not one website for everything. And so you can go to the CDC, there's the National Breast and Cervical Cancer Early Detection Program, but even that has its limits. We have information on our website. There's information on the American Cancer Society's website, but it really is not a dedicated space for all of it. But there are resources out there. There are nonprofits like mine that do whole screen and treat programs, but even that is, we have them in New York, we've had them in Cleveland, we've had them in New Orleans, but it's not everywhere. But there are other organizations who do it, and so the gaps are being filled. But it really is, once you reach out to people, people are connecting so that you do find those resources. But I would say the CDC and the National Breast and Cervical Cancer Early Detection Program are great places to start.
That's
Excellent.
good to know. So if a woman brings up a concern like pelvic pain or irregular spotting and her doctor dismisses it as just stress or perimenopause, what is the exact language or script she can use to insist on getting further testing without feeling like a difficult patient?
I mean, I don't know if I have the right language. I think you just have to follow up. And if you have the means, change doctors. Unfortunately, post COVID, that isn't as easy as it seems. I needed a follow up for something, and it was like months out. And I was just like, how is that possible? Literally, my son also, he couldn't walk. He jumped off a couch, and they couldn't get him in for like 30 days. I was just like, but he can't walk. And we have insurance, but that is, healthcare in America.
That's the current state of our healthcare.
I don't even think we have enough time to talk.
We don't. We could be on here all year long and we wouldn't have enough time for that topic.
But one of the things that I really want to say is just like, keep fighting for yourself. And that is exhausting. I want to acknowledge that when you have to fight for yourself and for what you're feeling, I see patients go through it all the time. And it is extremely difficult, but it's something that we have to keep doing. So I would really just encourage them to do it and put things in writing too. So you can call, but I think the best way to do it is get on the portal, send an email, and put things in writing.
Accountability.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And also you have access to your own records now, and it's nothing like studying your own health history, because you can tell you know what you've told the doctor. Right. What are they putting in the chart when you leave there?
Right.
It's true. So let's talk about the future
vaccination.
The future of prevention and the vaccination. So what is the current perspective on the HPV vaccine for adults? Is it ever too late to get protected?
So I feel like it's never too late because it's over 100 strains of human papillomavirus.
Say that again with an exclamation point.
There are over 100 strains, but that doesn't mean all of those strains cause cervical cancer. There are a few that are just pesky, they linger around and they cause cancer. There's some that cause genital warts, some that don't really do anything, but there are over 100 strains. So I think the vaccine is an incredible tool. I think that it is wonderful, but I also think that it has a serious marketing issue because when it first came out, there was the mandates. It was only for girls. Now it's for boys and girls. It is incredible. We're seeing where in Australia, they're already on the path to eliminate cervical cancer in their country. Denmark, Scotland, and Rwanda are right behind them. And of course, Rwanda has done an excellent job vaccinating through their school system. And so they are on a track to be another country that will not have cervical cancer in the future for generations to come. And here in the US, we're still struggling.
Well, given the current administration, and since we're on the vaccination piece, where does that stand now? Is that changing in terms of when someone should start getting the HPV vaccine, or even is it required anymore? Because, where does that stand anymore?
Well, it's constantly changing. What I will tell people is the vaccine is best when given early at age 9. You can also, I think, anywhere up to 14. But the reason why we start at 9 is because we want to get people before they're exposed to HPV. And the truth of the matter is young people are having sex, not just penetrative sex, oral sex, or whatever they deem as sex, earlier and earlier. And so 9 is the best safety net to get them fully vaccinated from HPV and give them their best chance of not getting an HPV related cancer.
And that is boys and girls.
Boys and girls.
Okay. Because I know when it started, the vaccine, it was like you said, initially just girls.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even aware that, boys were, getting it too now. So
yeah, it's very important that we get that messaging out there that it's also for boys, because boys can have penile cancer, anal cancers, or pharyngeal cancers, genital warts. We want to make sure that they're protected as well.
You hear that, boys? Get your HPV vaccines.
Shots. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that at-home testing. We're seeing a rise of those HPV sampling kits.
Mm-hmm.
Are these really reliable? And as your daily balance routine, should they be used with caution?
I think that, as any new thing comes out, there's going to be questions, and that's okay. There are a lot of people out there, myself including, who are willing to help. It may not be for everyone, but for the people who need it, it's a great, great tool. And I'm excited about it. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited that if I don't want to spread my legs in a stirrup and, in front of someone, hide my panties, worry if my legs are shaved, if my toenail, my feet are too crusty, I'm excited about that. But there are people who live hours away from an OBGYN and they don't have the capabilities of being screened by a provider. And this is an incredible tool for them to have. There are people who may live in places culturally where it's not okay for them to go in and be screened by someone else, and this would be a great tool for them. So for me, the advancement in medical technology just means that it's more for everyone and no one gets left behind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as far as lifestyle and resilience, what role do lifestyle factors like halting smoking and immune health play in helping the body clear HPV infection?
So I'm glad you brought up smoking, because people are always shocked to hear this. Smoking is terrible, but it is.
All smoking.
I'm sorry?
All smoking?
All smoking, but smoking is absolutely terrible when it comes to cervical cancer, because it weakens the cervix. I know you're thinking right now in your head, inhaling and then it goes straight down to the cervix. Yes, there is a correlation between smoking and cervical cancer. And so it really is bad. Again, I'm not someone to tell people, as long as they're not out killing, being mean and hateful to people, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but I am going to share the information with you that smoking is a top concern when it comes to cervical cancer. Vaping, I'm not going to get on that soapbox. That's another soapbox worse than smoking. But all of those things when it comes to cervical cancer are high risk factors.
Good to know.
Good info. So we're seeing a lot of buzz about AI in healthcare. How is artificial intelligence currently being used to improve the accuracy of the reading screenings? And do you see this closing the gap in disparities for women in underserved communities?
I have a love-hate with AI for different reasons. But one thing I'm excited about with AI, a patient sent me a message. She was like, I was feeling down and I put in Chat GPT what my survival rate would be. And I was like, you letting the computer tell you what your survival rate would be?
That's where we went wrong.
No, but then she told me that it brought up me, my story, and my organization and all this other stuff. And I was like, okay, Chat GPT.
Plugging you. I love it.
And so that part I think is great. There are sometimes, I know there's an effort to get Chat GPT and other AIs to stop reading medical records because of things might be wrong or just off a little bit. But so that's the exciting part for me, that, it's offering some type of hope and awareness. But I'm concerned with, when it's wrong. I'm also concerned about the amount of water and resources from the planet that artificial intelligence uses. So that part to me is a little kind of shaky, but there are some parts to it that's very exciting. I do know a lot of conferences are starting to have sessions on artificial intelligence and the medical world. So there's still more to come.
Right. Well, I'm hoping you're going to share some information with us so that we can, put that on our content when we
Absolutely.
deliver this episode. So if a listener, and we're going to talk a little bit about our call to action, if a listener wants to get involved or find a screening center near them today, what are the most impactful resources available?
I would first and foremost go to the National Breast and Cervical Cancer Early Detection Program website. I would go to cdc.gov. For the vaccine, there's a great resource for parents, but also for people who work in the medical field. I co-chair the National HPV Vaccination Roundtable that is through the American Cancer Society, and also my website, cervivor.org, CERVIVOR. There are a lot of great resources out there, and we really just want to do what we do to make sure no woman falls through the cracks, because every single cervix matters. But I absolutely don't want Black and brown people who are oftentimes, least and last to fall through the cracks.
Awesome.
Well, we just want to say thank you so much again for sharing your expertise. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we're going to let you go back to your day as we wrap things up here, and we definitely look forward to having you again in the future.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you, and God bless you for doing this work. We got to make sure people are aware and they know.
Thank you, Tamika.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
And this brings us to the end of our conversation on Beyond the Pap Smear. Listen, if today's discussion left you feeling a little bit anxious, remember our episode on mastering mindfulness. Self-care is the foundation and allows you to be there for those you love.
The Daily Balance takeaways. Schedule the screening. Don't let fear dictate your future. Number 2, ask for the HPV test. Ensure you are getting the most modern screening available. Number 3, listen to your body. You know you're normal better than anyone else.
Yes. So, get those screening kits if you don't want to go to the doctor.
Or if you're too far.
Yeah, too far. Yeah. Absolutely. There, you have access to those. Go to your drugstore, talk to someone about getting that kit.
And if you're not vibing well with your doctor, get another one. Move on. Yes. Your life depends on it.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Don't let your healthcare provider be the one that causes you to be at risk for this.
Yeah.
So thank you for tuning in and seeking a deeper understanding. Look, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channels. It goes a long way in supporting us and these important causes. And you know what? And the conversation doesn't just stop here.
Never does.
So for our dedicated supporters, stick around for our after show called
Tea Time. Oh, yeah. Tea Time is where we get to connect with our closest community. If you want to be a part of that inner circle and get instant access to the after show, go to our website, www.thedailybalancemedia.com, to subscribe and join our community for Tea Time.
Exactly. So until our next episode, always remember,
count it all joy.
That's it.